In the grand, intricate tapestry of a human life, some threads are woven with joy and love, while others are stained with betrayal and sorrow. For Elara Vance, her first life was a masterpiece of deception, a beautiful illusion crafted by the man she loved, only to be torn apart in its final, brutal moments. She was the heiress to a corporate dynasty, brilliant and trusting, with a future that seemed as bright and limitless as her own ambition. At the center of that future was Julian, a man with a smile that could disarm nations and a charm that felt like warm sunlight. He was her fiancé, her partner, her confidant. She had placed her heart and her family's legacy in his hands, never once suspecting the cold, calculating void that lay behind his perfect eyes. The end came not with a dramatic confrontation, but with a quiet, chilling finality. A business deal, a secluded location, and a gentle push. As she fell from the precipice, the last thing she saw was his handsome face, devoid of love, filled only with a chillingly serene avarice. Her last thought was not of anger, but of a profound, heart-shattering question. Why? But the universe, in its mysterious and often cruel wisdom, sometimes offers a second draft. Elara's consciousness didn't fade into oblivion. Instead, it snapped back into existence with the force of a tidal wave, leaving her gasping for breath in a bed she knew intimately, in a room she hadn't seen for years. The sunlight streaming through her window was from a morning 5 years before her murder. She was alive. She had been reborn. But she had not come back empty-handed. She had returned with a terrible, wondrous, and deafening gift. It started as a low hum, a background static she couldn't place. But soon, the static resolved into distinct streams of thought. The maid bringing her breakfast was thinking of her overdue rent and the envy she felt for Elara's silk sheets. Her father, pacing downstairs, was a storm of anxiety about a failing merger. Her cousin, who greeted her with a warm hug, was mentally cataloging the jewelry on her vanity, wondering how much it would fetch. Elara could hear them, all of them. It was a cacophony of hidden greed, petty jealousy, and silent resentments, a secret, ugly world that had always existed just beneath the surface of polite smiles and pleasantries. And then Julian walked in, a bouquet of her favorite lilies in his hand, his smile as radiant as she remembered. He spoke of his undying love, his dreams for their future. But behind his words, Elara heard the silent truth. She heard his thoughts, a chilling counter-narrative. The merger is failing. Her father will be desperate soon. If I play this just right, the entire Vance empire will fall into my lap. She's so beautifully naive. The confirmation was a shard of ice in her soul. Her memories were real. Her death was not a nightmare. It was a preview. This time, however, she was no longer the unsuspecting lamb. She was a wolf who could hear the hunter's every thought. As her memories foretold, the Vance Corporation teetered on the brink of collapse. Her father, a good man but a worrier, saw only one path to salvation, a strategic alliance. Not with Julian, whose own company was too small to help, but with a true titan of industry. The solution came in the form of a marriage proposal, an archaic but effective tool for merging power. Elara was to be wed to Damien Blackwood, the CEO of Blackwood Industries, a man whose name was spoken in hushed, fearful tones in boardrooms across the globe. Damien Blackwood was an enigma. He was known as the Ice King, a ruthless corporate predator who had built an empire from nothing before the age of 30. He was notoriously reclusive, brutally efficient, and emotionally impenetrable. Stories about him were modern corporate folklore, that he never smiled, that he could financially ruin a rival with a single phone call, that his heart was nothing more than a cold, hard diamond. Elara was petrified. If the thoughts of ordinary people were a swamp of malice, what unimaginable horrors would fester in the mind of a man celebrated for his cruelty? She was trading a charming viper for a reputed monster. Their wedding was a somber, opulent affair, a union of assets, not hearts. Elara walked down the aisle, a beautiful sacrifice in white, buffeted by the silent thoughts of the guests. She heard the pity, the envy, the speculation. Poor girl, being sold to that monster. I'd trade places with her in a heartbeat. I wonder if he's even human. Then she reached the altar and stood beside Damien Blackwood. He was taller than she expected, a formidable presence in a perfectly tailored suit. He turned his head slightly, his steel-gray eyes meeting hers for a fleeting moment. She braced herself for the tidal wave of dark, predatory thoughts she was certain she would hear. But there was nothing. For the first time since her rebirth, her mind was met not with a cacophony, but with a profound, absolute, and terrifying silence. It was like standing at the edge of a black hole, a void so complete it seemed to swallow all sound. It wasn't empty, it was sealed, impenetrable. This, she thought, with a dawning horror, was a silence born not of peace, but of immense, disciplined power. This man wasn't just a monster, he was a master of his own darkness. His mind a fortress so secure that even her unique ability couldn't find a crack. Her new life was a lesson in sustained terror. She lived in his palatial, minimalist mansion, a beautiful cage where every shadow seemed to hold a threat. She analyzed his every move, searching for the monster she knew was lurking beneath. When he passed her a cup of tea, his fingers brushing hers, she would flinch, expecting to feel a jolt of his true nature. When he spoke, his voice was a low, precise baritone, offering curt, formal pleasantries that felt like the calm before a storm. His silence was a constant, screaming threat, a testament to the unimaginable depths of the malevolence he must be hiding. But while she lived in fear of her husband, she was not idle. Armed with her power, Elara became a formidable player in the world that had once discarded her. She re-entered her family's company, and with her newfound insight, she was unstoppable. She could hear the bluffs of her rivals during negotiations, sense the deception in a partner's proposal, and anticipate the market's shifts by listening to the collective consciousness of its key players. She single-handedly dismantled Julian's insidious attempts to undermine her family from within, countering his every move with an almost prophetic precision. She was no longer a pawn, she was the queen, and the entire board was visible to her. Then, things began to happen that didn't fit her narrative of the silent monster. A rival company, known for its dirty tactics, made a play to poach her top research team. Before Elara could even formulate a counter-strategy, she heard the distant, panicked thoughts of that rival CEO as his company was suddenly buried in a catastrophic, perfectly legal, and completely untraceable corporate attack. All evidence pointed to the work of an apex predator. All evidence pointed to Damien. He had acted, unasked, to protect her interests, moving with the silence and lethality of a shadow. On another occasion, she overheard a member of the household staff thinking viciously about her, mocking her as the Ice Queen's pretty pet. Elara said nothing, choosing to ignore it. The next day, the staff member was quietly and permanently reassigned, dismissed for a verifiable history of petty theft that had suddenly come to light. It was too neat, too efficient. It was a warning shot fired by an unseen guardian. The silence from Damien's mind remained, but for the first time, she wondered if its purpose wasn't to conceal, but to shield. The turning point came during a tense charity gala. Julian, his plans failing and his composition fraying, cornered her in a quiet corridor. His charming mask slipped, and for a moment the cruel murderer she remembered was visible in his eyes. He grabbed her arm, his thoughts a torrent of fury and frustration. Suddenly, a presence loomed behind him. It was Damien. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. He simply stood there, his cold, steady gaze fixed on Julian.
The sheer weight of his presence was suffocating. Julian, the viper, recoiled as if faced with a dragon. He released her and stammered an apology before practically fleeing. Damien looked at Elara, his gray eyes holding an expression she couldn't decipher. Then he simply turned and walked away, leaving her once again in the wake of his profound silence.
Later that night, unable to sleep, Elara wandered the quiet halls of the mansion. Her hand brushed against a small, silver music box on a mantelpiece. Acting on instinct, she opened it. A delicate, haunting melody began to play, a lullaby she hadn't heard in decades. The music was a key, unlocking a door in her mind that had been sealed shut by time and trauma. A memory, fragmented and hazy, flooded her senses. She was a little girl again, no older than 7, hiding in the dark, overgrown gardens of a vast estate during a party. She was crying, lost and terrified after witnessing a violent argument between 2 adults. Then another child appeared, a small boy with unnaturally serious gray eyes and a stillness that seemed out of place in a child. He didn't speak much, but he sat with her in the darkness, a silent, calming presence. He shared his jacket with her, and together they waited out the chaos of the adult world, 2 small islands of quiet in a storm. The memory solidified with a jolt of recognition that stole her breath. The boy's face, the serious set of his jaw, the quiet intensity in his eyes. It was Damien, a forgotten bond forged in a moment of shared childhood trauma. Armed with this fractured memory, she sought him out. She found him in his study, a vast room lined with books, the city lights twinkling below. She didn't accuse him or question him about his business dealings. She asked a simple, quiet question that changed everything. "The music box," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "I remember the song. And I remember a garden. Were you there?" For the first time since she had known him, the iron mask of Damien Blackwood cracked. A flicker of something vulnerable, something deeply human crossed his face. He finally broke his long, stoic silence, and the truth he revealed was far more astonishing and tragic than anything she could have ever imagined. He told her that he, too, had a secret ability, one that was the perfect, terrible inverse of her own. He was a telepath, but where she could hear the thoughts of those near her, he was cursed to hear the thoughts of everyone, all at once, all the time. From the moment he was born, his mind had been a relentless storm of mental noise, the hopes, fears, lies, and pains of millions of people, a constant, maddening cacophony that never ceased. This global roar had forced him to build immense psychic walls, to project an aura of cold detachment, not out of cruelty, but as a desperate act of self-preservation. To be emotional, to be open, would be to drown. But there was one anomaly in his cursed existence, one single, solitary exception to the endless noise. A little girl he met in a garden, whose presence next to him had, for a few blessed moments, silenced the world. As they grew up, their paths had occasionally crossed at social functions or business events. Each time he was near her, the deafening roar in his head would fade into a beautiful, peaceful quiet. She was the only person in the entire world whose thoughts he could not hear. She was his only sanctuary. He confessed that he had spent his life watching her from a distance, orchestrating events to ensure her safety. He built his entire empire, not for power or wealth, but to create a fortress strong enough to protect the one person who gave him peace, without ever letting her know. The arranged marriage hadn't been a hostile takeover of her life. It was his last, desperate gambit to bring her into the safety of his fortress after he learned of the true danger she was in from Julian, a danger he couldn't warn her about without revealing his own secret. The revelation settled over Elara, rearranging the entire universe of her new life. His silence wasn't a wall to keep her out. It was the sacred space she created just by existing. His coldness wasn't a sign of malice. It was a shield against a world that screamed at him. He wasn't her jailer, he was her guardian. He saw her as his salvation, while she had seen him as her damnation. The pieces of their mirrored abilities clicked into place with perfect, heartbreaking symmetry. She was born to hear the world's malice, except for his. He was born to hear the world's noise, except for hers. She was the silence she craved, she was the quiet he needed. Looking at this powerful, tormented man, her fear finally dissolved, replaced by a wave of profound, overwhelming empathy and a love deeper than she had ever known. She took a step closer, her heart aching for the lonely life he had led. "Can you?" she asked softly. "Can you hear me now?" Damien looked at her, and for the very first time, he gave her a true smile. It was a small, hesitant thing, but it transformed his entire face, erasing the ice and revealing the man who had sat with a scared little girl in a garden all those years ago. And then a voice spoke directly into her mind, a voice that was warm and clear and full of a lifetime of restrained emotion. "Only you," his thoughts wrapped around hers. "It's always only been you." Their new beginning was forged not in words, but in a shared, silent understanding. Elara no longer feared the poisonous thoughts of the world, for she now had an anchor in Damien's peaceful silence. And Damien was no longer a prisoner of the world's endless noise. He could finally lower his walls and focus on the one voice in the universe that mattered. Together, they confronted Julian one last time. It was not a battle, but an execution. With Damien's silent, unshakable presence at her back, Elara calmly and systematically exposed every one of Julian's crimes, using her intimate knowledge of his thoughts to dismantle his life with surgical precision. Their story became a testament to the mysteries of connection. It's a reminder that what we perceive as a threat can sometimes be our greatest protection, and that the most profound communication often transcends spoken words. For Elara and Damien, they were two sides of the same coin, two souls with perfectly mirrored abilities, destined to find peace and purpose not in spite of their strange gifts, but because of them. In a world of noise and malice, they had found their silence. They had found their sanctuary. They had found each other. Outro music begins, a more hopeful and romantic version of the intro piano melody, swelling to a conclusion.